Welcome to Sew with Monty. In this section of the casual shirt series, we're going to sew the side seams and put the hems in the sleeve and the bottom. Right now I have the edge of my shirt serged off with my overlock machine. You can do this with a zigzag, or you can do a different type of seam treatment. I'm going to use a regular 5/8 inch seam and press it open, but you could do a flat felled seam, a French seam, all kinds of different seams. You could even just put it together and top stitch. But we're going to go with the basics here. And the next step is pinning. So the pinning process will be critical at the armhole. Now remember, we have an open set sleeve, but right at the armhole, I want to make sure that my seam stays together. So to keep my seam together here, I'm going to put the two seams on top of each other, and I'm going to pin on each side of the seam, not just once, but twice. This way, if there's a chance that my sewing machine shifts a little bit, it won't pull the seam off of itself. And then I'm going to pin down my sleeve and all the way down the side seam, putting my pins in perpendicular so that I can get them out easily. So let's go over to the sewing machine and we'll sew the seams together and then talk about hems. So I've pinned my side seam straight through perpendicularly to the edge, but I've decided at the bottom to leave a vent, a slit right before the hem. So I put a pin 4 inches above the hem line, and I'm going to stop right there, and then I'm going to turn this into a slit. So the first thing I'm going to do is just sew down through here 5/8 inch seam allowance and back up right above the slit. I'm going to do both sides that way, and then we will press the seam and go to the hems. So now I have my side seam sewn, and I've left an opening down here so that I can make my vent or slit. And I've pinned back the seam allowance along that area the same as I have up here, 5/8 of an inch. So I'm just going to press down my seam, leaving it open all the way through. And I'm going to do this through the sleeve as well, and the vent, the slit area, vent or slit. Once I have this pressed, I'll take it back to the the sewing machine, and I will top stitch the vent or slit area before I do my hem. So let me finish pressing, and I'll sew this and show you how it's done. So now this is the right side of our slit, and I'm going to put a 1/4 inch top stitch squaring off here and coming down the other side, so that when I hem my shirt, it will actually have a little opening just above the hem. So let's do this. So I'm using the edge of my foot as a guide, and I'm going to put my needle centered, and I'm using a 3 stitch length, and I'm going to use the edge of my foot along the fold so that I can keep an even spacing through here. So I'm just going to start by going forward slightly, backing up to the edge, and then going all the way up until I'm right at the point where I'm going to turn. So I want to make sure my seam allowance is laying flat, the other side of my slit is laying flat, and I'm going to come right up through here and just go beyond the opening slightly, about 1/4 of an inch, needle in, and turn my foot around and come straight across the top of the slit area. And then when I get the equivalent spacing to go down the other side, you may have to adjust your needle a little bit so that my foot is lined up with this fold, I'll come down the other side. So let me do the other slit, and then we'll talk about the hem. So now I have my hem pinned to the ironing board. This protects my hands from getting burnt, and it gives me a better fold line, a longer fold line and a better fold line than if I was just trying to hold it individually with my hand. The slit is right here, and I've made sure I've got a pin above the slit to secure it, and then I've made sure that the two ends are the same length. So the next thing will be I'll press this at 5/8 inch. Now, how I know how to keep this hem even is I'm using a seam gauge, and I've set it the distance I need my hem, and I just book the seam gauge along the fold line to make sure my hem stays even all the way. It seems like a little bit more work, but it's well worth it in the end because it's going to make this look so much better than if I just started eyeing it and trying to fold it up that way. So I've pressed this section in. I'll finish pressing the rest of this hem and then I'll show you the next part of pressing. So now I have the first press in. And the second part of this is going to be, I'm going to take the pins out and turn the raw edge into the first fold that I just pressed. And I'm going to pin it again, making sure the raw edge is touching the crease, the bottom crease of that fold. And I'm going to press this all again. This is going to clean up any raw edges. I'm going to put it even back into my facing so that I don't see any raw edges here. So lift up the facing and make sure you do it right here as well. Pin again, and then we're going to repress this whole section with all of the raw edges turned under. And then we take it back to the sewing machine and we're going to edge stitch, backing up at the slits and going all the way to lifting up the facing and sewing just under here where the facing is. So let me finish pressing and then we'll go back to the machine and we'll start sewing. Now I'm ready to sew in my quarter inch double fold hem, and this time I'm going to exceed into my facing just a little bit, about a ½ inch here, so that it holds the facing up and it doesn't let it droop down. So I'm going to put it in here. I'm going to use the same setup I used before when I did the slit, using the edge of my foot along the fold, place my needle in center and using a 3 stitch length. And I'm going to start by going about a ½ inch into the facing and going forward just a little bit and then backing up and then going forward the rest of the way, making sure that I just sew along the very edge of the fold of my hem. And I've got the wrong side up so I can see this. Now that means I can't keep my foot right exactly on the fold edge, but most importantly is that I keep the needle lined up with the folded edge of my hem. And I'm watching the center of my foot that way so that I don't miss and fall off that folded edge. And I'm going to go all the way to the end where the slit is. And when I get here, I'm going to back up again, go all the way to the edge and back up. And then I'm going to proceed with this method throughout the rest of the hem. And this is what it looks like on the underside. And then on the top side, it's very clean and looks very nice over here. So let me finish this and then we'll go back and take a look at it and start the sleeves. So now I'm ready to do my sleeves. So what I'm going to do is, you may have a notch in here where your hem turns up. If you don't have a notch, you need to determine how much of a hem you want to have. I'm going with 1.5 inches, and then I'm going to do a turn under of about 3/8 of an inch to do the clean finish of the raw edge. So I'm going to start by pinning right here on both sides of my seam, and then I'm going to use my seam gauge and measure off 1.5 inches. I can only do so much at a time because I'm sewing in a circle. I'm pinning in a circle inside my sleeve. So I'll go as far as the sleeve opening will allow me to go, and then I'll stop, press this, and then move on to the second section. So I'm going to press this right in here first. And then I'll unpin this and slide it down and press the rest of my sleeve. So let me go around and do this, and then I'll show you the pressing of the turn under. Now I've pressed my sleeve once all the way around at 1.5 inches. The second part of this is I've turned under the edge of the raw edge of my sleeve hem, and I've pinned it again and made sure that this is evenly spaced at 1.25 inches. So I'm turning under 1/4 inch up here, pinning and pressing. After I press this, I'm going to come back to the sewing machine and I'm going to edge stitch this hem all the way around my sleeve, making sure I stay as even as possible. So let me get the sleeves hemmed and I'll show you what they look like, and we'll be ready to finish the shirt off. So now I'm hemming my sleeve, and I'm sewing inside the sleeve instead of on the outside for two reasons. It's much easier to rotate if it's inside, and secondly, I can see my fold line and make sure I'm staying on top of it. I started off right here, and I didn't back stitch. I just went forward because when I come around, I'm going to overlap it, and then I will back stitch right here. So let me finish doing this, and then we'll take a look at all the hems.